I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not.
Oh, hi.
Mark. Okay, yeah, a bit rusty here, but it's been a minute since I've done a review. Busy month, lots of Orpos had, lots of Defiant Jazz listened to, so please don't be too harsh on my performance review. I hope my commentary and perspective on Severance is enough to meet this quarter's quota and result in a session that does not require a mandatory break for lunch. Jokes aside, let's get to talking about the documentary that they made about my workplace, the series most people commonly refer to as Severance. So, spoilers for both seasons of Severance, as well as, funny enough, Knives Out going forward. So this is your final chance to disembark my Titanic of a video before we collide with the narrative iceberg, so to speak. Severance, as both an inherent premise and as a complete series, is compelling. It's fascinating because most everyone can see the immediate appeal. We can all, at the very least, understand why such a thing could exist and would exist. Hell, it probably only took a few minutes of the pilot episode for each of us to consider whether or not we'd strike the same deal Mark Scout did. After all, doesn't a world without work sound like bliss when you first think about it? Hell, I'm sure most people would make that deal even if they weren't going through an unending life of relentless grief. But Severance is a show that justifies its existence with more than just its initial hook. It is so much more than its premise. Yes, it utilizes its premise to the fullest extent, but it does so to create a heightened reality. It creates this extreme that we can observe for maximum drama. Severance as a series always takes every opportunity to maximize what it can be. Think of a murder mystery. Yes, very cliched of me to pose this example, but it's probably the most effective way for me to get across what I'm trying to say. The best murder mysteries, the best whodunits, are the ones that are not only clever, but dramatically satisfying. Knives Out, for example. Yes, the mystery is compelling and the clues, twists, and turns are very tightly crafted. But with all else being equal, what if the reveal at the very end of the movie was that the far-right little twerp kid was the killer? Would the movie be as good as we all think that it is? Of course not. But why is this the case in my hypothetical movie, Knives In? Simply put, that series of events is not as interesting. It's not as visceral and compelling to us as viewers because the Nazi child means less to us as a character than Ransom did. So not only does the answer to the question that we're given need to be correct at a base level, but the answer should also be the most interesting answer possible. This is what creates a good mystery, and in a broader sense, this concept is what creates a good story. And the creative team behind Severance understands this concept as well as anyone else in the game right now. At every opportunity, they put this concept into practice. From the biggest question to the tiniest details, they execute on the core philosophy of choosing the most interesting dramatic possibility. At a place like Lumen, where every affection is a performance and every action is a veiled manipulation, what happens when Milchik gets promoted, for example? His old role, the one he clearly took to heart and took very seriously, is now performed by a literal child. What does that suggest to him about the position that he valued? And Milchik's new office is barely adjusted for him, with his computer still greeting Harmony Cobell well after her time at Lumen has ended. Would a place with the technology to create different lives for people with a simple implant really have such basic and slow technological issues? Milchik's gift is also the most blatant instance of this philosophy in practice, because it's blackface. It's racism he's supposed to show gratitude for. It's simultaneously performative, meaningless, manipulative, and insulting. And all of this is fully intentional. But when he tries to find solace in this cruelty he's experiencing with Natalie, his only ally of a coworker, what does he get? He gets shut out. Isolated, reminded of how alone and vulnerable he really is at Lumen, as intended by Lumen, and certainly as intended for us to pick up on and empathize with as viewers. Even his performance review is nothing more than an exercise in control. Critique for big words? This is just the pot calling the kettle black. Bert himself tells Irving how particular Lumen as a company is with their vocabulary. Drummond harping on it so much for Milchik is for one reason and one reason only: control. Milchik's entire story is one of control. His vying for control of MDR, his struggle as Lumen controls him, the constant question of just how long he'll tolerate this middle position of his before he seeks full control for himself. In the end, like many victims, he sides with his oppressor, but damn if you weren't on the edge of your seat hoping for any other kind of outcome from this antagonist that you've grown oddly fond of. Now, back to our main character, and thus our main drama. For Mark, the central story of the series in general, this idea of the most dramatically interesting, holds true in every regard. He went to Lumen to escape his grief and the ghost of Gemma. Ironically, every day at his work, his innie was closer to his wife than Mark ever was since he thought that she died. When he finally does learn the truth about Gemma, he's forced to rely on his innie, the version of himself that he's essentially kept captive at Lumen for 2 years, the version of himself that he created for the sole purpose of not loving Gemma. He must rely on this second life of his if he has any hope of seeing the love of his first life again. Meanwhile, the second Mark, innie Mark, is given just as difficult a conundrum. Does he help his outie, the person who created him, but also the person who has essentially kept him a prisoner? Does he risk not only destroying his own life, but the life of his love for the love of someone else? The love he cannot see and simply has to take outie Mark's word on. Dramatically, there is not a more interesting way to pose this central conflict. It would be easy if the two Marks were fully aligned and cooperating. It would be easy if Mark was fully reintegrated and operating cohesively during the completion of Cold Harbor. But that wouldn't be as interesting, would it? The most interesting version of the show is the one where the Marks are at odds with one another. The one where we don't quite know what any Mark will do when it comes down to it. The one where we're not quite sure how Helly will respond to any Mark's actions when she's forced to consider what it might do to the lives of those on the severed floor if she follows his plan. The one where the final test for Gemma, Cold Harbor, is about conclusively proving that even the most awful and painful memories can become nothing once severed. Even when a physical manifestation of these pained memories needs to be handled by the newly severed human that you've turned yourself into, you can feel nothing. In this version of the story, this version of the show that we are given, the ultimate purpose of Severance is about as mundane as it can be. It's simply to remove displeasure. There isn't a true ulterior motive as far as we can tell. There isn't anything inherently evil about the final result that it's trying to achieve. In fact, it's a banal idea at the end of the day. It's just the means do not justify the ends. The end goal of removing suffering from the human experience is arguably good. Yet this just makes the horrible things that Mark, Gemma, Helly, and every other severed person endure all the more terrible. Because when it comes down to it, none of it is even necessary. None of it needs to be as cruel or torturous as it is for them. All of the suffering they endure is nothing more than a result of Lumen's indifference and the indifference of so many others. This part of Severance is so real and so close to life that it's just painful to see, because we know how true it is. If our world was given the opportunity, we'd very likely have our own Lumen, and in some ways we already do. And in this version of the show, there's only one way for the characters we've come to care about to win. This all only works for outie Mark if the innies are willing to risk everything for the sake of some people that they've never met. People that they're essentially trusting blindly. Without Dylan putting himself on the line at the drop of a hat, without Helly leading a communist uprising for choreography and merriment, without Lorne helping Mark after her goats were put at risk, none of this works. It takes everything these characters have to even stand a chance against the indifferent cruelty that they're up against. And when by some miracle this does all come together, the drama that Dan Erickson has chosen to draw out is why us witnessing it feels all the more satisfying. We get to see love endure, we get to see trust be built in a relationship, we get to see any solidarity. All of what we find satisfying about the conclusion of Severance Season 2 comes from our attachment to the characters and the meaningfulness of their choices. These thoughts, these emotions we get to feel as viewers, all come back to one thing. The question the writing team of Severance is always asking, the philosophical principle they are always adhering to. What would be the most dramatically interesting possibility? They always, without fail, make the choice that offers the most drama. The choice that allows us to get the deepest insight into the characters that they've put in front of us. The choice that allows us to get the fullest emotional experience of the story they've put together. And that's why Severance works so well. For Severance Season 2, I give it a glowing performance review, 4.5 stars out of 5. My only complaint being that it's just so goddamn dark sometimes. I mean, come on, I can barely see certain scenes. Also, I hate Rickon, but both of those things seem to be intentional, so I can't really be too upset. Anyway, watch Severance if you haven't yet. If you have watched it, rewatch it. It's got the sauce. Until next time.